On today's Locked On Jayhawks, we preview Kansas against Illinois. Can the Jayhawks start 2-0?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Johnson. You can give me a follow at DJohnsonRadio on Twitter, and you can find our show. Thank you to everydayers tuning in to each and every episode. Thank you for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. Anywhere you get your podcasts, also on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. We are previewing the Kansas-Illinois game. Maybe this is perfect fodder for you to listen to if you're making the drive out there. Obviously, there are a ton of KU fans who live in or are from Chicago, and that's an even closer drive if you're going to the Illinois game. So I think Kansas is going to have a good attendance for this game. And thank you if you're tuning in to the show for the first time, for the second time, for whatever time. We appreciate you being part of the show. So we'll get into the matchup here, the matchups of the game that could decide, player matchups of the game, and we'll get into our Hawks to soar in a little props pick here on the show of Locked On Jayhawks, which is brought to you by Game Time. You might not have tickets yet and you're looking to get tickets. Well, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Kansas takes on Illinois Saturday night, 6 o'clock. It's going to be on FS1. Of course, you can listen to it on the radio as well. And this is a rematch of last season's game in Lawrence. Now, last season's game was a Friday night game. That was the game that Kansas did the blackout. They had the awesome black uniforms. I don't know what they're going to be wearing for this one. It seems like they're going to have a bunch of different uniforms over the course of the season. We still got to see the red uniforms at one point. That won't be this game. I would imagine that'll be a home game. Again, the black uniforms, I'd imagine those are going to resurface this season. They think that's going to be a home game too, to be able to do kind of another blackout and that sort of thing. But anyway, Illinois comes into this one 1-0. They beat Eastern Illinois 45-0 in week one. Kansas also a 45-point victory in their FCS game. And this is the first sellout for Illinois since 2016, which is hard to think. That game was a game against North Carolina with Mitch Trubisky coming into town. So that's a bit of a throwback there. And that was a game that Illinois lost by like over 20 points. So you're hoping that, that's a good sign for Kansas in this one. I do think that as much as there is probably a lot of hype for Illinois and what Bret Bielema has done, it's hard to be like, okay, why is this the first sellout? Nothing against, like, Kansas is a ranked team. Kansas is a really good team, but like you look at some of the teams Illinois plays, and again, I don't know how often they're hosting, Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State in some of these games, but like, you would think there would have been a game between then and now that would have got that sort of hype. I don't know. Maybe it's the perfect confluence, but maybe there's a part of it too where it's like there's a lot of KU fans who are attending this game, and that's part of why it got sold out. And so maybe this will actually end up being, not that bad of a road environment from what you would think from a normal sellout against a Big Ten opponent. I don't know. Remains to be seen. So you look back to that game against Illinois last year. Kansas won 34-23. Jalon was awesome. He had a 87 total QBR in the game. Did have the one interception, but he was making some great throws downfield. Some great scrambles in the pocket. The play of the game to me that I think of, it's either the deep ball to Luke Grimm from Jalon Daniels, which is a great catch, as well as the throw toward the end of the half, or it's the play where he is dipping and dodging by Jerzon Newton, their stud D tackle, who has since gone to the NFL, kind of at his own goal line, and then bobbing to the left and throws that laser down the field for a completed ball. Jalon was really good in this game. You need him to be really good in this game again now that you're on the road. And Hishaw and Devin Neal combined for almost 220 rushing yards in that game last year, 2 scores. KU ran for 262 as a team. So really they did whatever they wanted on offense, just kind of slowed down at the end of the game. You flip that to the other end, Illinois had 139 rushing yards. They did have a solid yard per carry number, but if I told you they're going to be held to 150 or less rushing yards in this game, I think you take that for sure if you're Kansas coming in. You also held Luke Altmyer to a 40.6 QBR. He had 2 picks. He was sacked 6 times, and it was a game that behind that blackout early energy, Kansas got up 21-0. They were up 28-7 at halftime. It was 34-7 with under 4 minutes to go in the third quarter. So you heard me say all offseason that game was not as close as the 11-point score indicated. That's why you were up 27 points with about 18 minutes to go. Whether it was the combination of just letting your foot off the gas, some weird plays that happened, like the Luke Altmyer just breakdown where he ran for 72 yards and nobody was within like 20 yards of him. Whether it was the ejections off the targeting calls of Kobe Bryant and Austin Booker, arguably your two best defenders a season ago. I mean, that's going to, if you're without two of your best defenders, like that's going to make it harder. There was a bad spot on a third down that led to you having to go for a fourth down that you didn't get. Like that should have just been a first down on the third down. Whatever it was, the score ended up being 34-23 with 3:27 left. They had the ball, and then Quentin Lassiter got the interception to kind of seal the deal. But Illinois now comes in with that 1-0 record after that win over Eastern Illinois. This is a team that won 8 games in 2022. They lost a ton of NFL talent after that 2022 season. Then they won 5 games last season, lost some more NFL talent like Newton, who I mentioned. But now they're kind of fostering that next wave with some sophomores and juniors and solid transfer additions. I definitely think this Illinois team is better than they were a season ago, but I don't think they're as good as the 2022 team. Now, offensively, Illinois finished 83rd nationally last season in points per game, 90th in points per play, 61st in yards per play. And that was derived off of being 100th in rush yards per play, despite being 57th in offensive line run push. So the O-line actually did a decent job in run blocking, but they didn't have the running backs to go behind until Feagin, their now starting running back, emerged at the end of the season, but they didn't have that all season. They were also 51st in passing yards per attempt, but they were 112th in sack yards, or in sacks per pass attempt, I should say. So the offensive line was okay, above average at run blocking. They were bad at pass blocking a season ago. And they are 80th in returning offensive production, according to Pick Six Preview. So, a little bit of returning production, some transfers coming in. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, they ranked just 96th in points allowed per game last season. They were 82nd in points allowed per play, 46th in yards allowed per play. So that actually tells a better story there. But I think, turnovers really hurt this team. They turned it over too much on the offensive end, and that led to short fields or some bad situations for the defense. They were 47th in yards allowed per carry, so they did a good job limiting explosive runs when you look at the explosive run rate against, but they didn't get a ton of negative plays their way. And then in the passing game, they were 45th in yards allowed per attempt, but they were 69th in QB rating against. Also, did a good job limiting explosive plays. But they're 50th in production returning on this end, so more production back on this end. They mentioned in the preseason wanting to be more aggressive, so keep an eye on how Kansas handles some blitzes early in the season, especially with a new center, pointing out the protections in Bryce Foster. What's the importance of this game kind of becomes the big theme, because you look at this, and obviously if you have the option, would you rather, like if somebody's like, you can only pick one of the two, would you rather Kansas win this game or any of the other Big 12 games? You're taking any of the other Big 12 games. What is the path to Kansas making it into the college football playoff, to winning the Big 12? It's winning Big 12 games in the regular season. So it's less important than those, but there's also a different level of importance on this game that some of those games don't have. And that is establishing early season momentum, where you can really, with a statement win on the road or just any win on the road against a power opponent, really start to grab some momentum in the early portion of the season and have that confidence that you need to go through the rest of the season. Like I look at last year, the win against Illinois, I think that fueled a lot of early season momentum for KU and belief of how good you could be. You look back to the game 2 years ago in Morgantown against West Virginia. That provided the belief that this team could make it to a bowl game. The new era comments from Jalon Daniels. Now, this team has been around the block a few times, that if you get picked off on the road in this one, you have to trust that they'll be able to bounce back and figure it out from there. But that's the other part of this. If you lose this game, it's not just about the missed opportunity to gain momentum. It's also the idea that, okay, well, theoretically, you could lose this game and win the rest of your Big 12 games and it won't matter. But if you lose this game, doesn't that give the warning sign, the signal that you're probably not going to win all of those Big 12 games, because Illinois is kind of a team that is projected to win 5, 6, 7 games. And so, yes, it's playing them on the road and stuff like that. But like, that does not bode well for you when you do have to go on the road against West Virginia a few weeks after this, or play Iowa State at home, or some of these other games, right, that could get a little bit tricky there. So that is the importance of this one, just kind of showing what you are. And if you are a real contender, I guess we can get into the conversation of like, well, who knows? What if Kansas does go 11-1 in the regular season and you lose in the Big 12 championship game? If you're 11-2, you still have a shot at making the college football playoff as an at-large. But if you lose this game, that would certainly hurt that case there. So I think there is importance, even though it's a different level and different type of importance for KU. But nonetheless, I'm excited to see it, and should be a fun one on the road for KU. Let's get to our matchups that could determine this game. This is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for small businesses, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. They help you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who are actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, continuing on, this is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making this your first listen every day. Don't forget to check out Locked On College Football. I was just on it the other day talking about this matchup where you can find more for this game and across the country by making that your second listen. All right, so our first down of matchups. Who establishes the run better? It is no secret what both these teams want to do. They want to impose their will and run the freaking football. Last season, when Illinois allowed 3.9 yards per carry or more, they went just 2-5. Whereas on the flip side, they went 3-2 when they gave up less than that. You could say, okay, that's a little bit of a difference, not a huge difference. What if I also told you the two wins when they did that last year were a close game against Toledo that they probably shouldn't have won, and against Florida Atlantic by 6 points. So clearly, if you can run on them, like that's something they try to take away. They want to run the football and they want to stop the run. So if you run on them, you're taking away one of their strengths, or in theory, something that they want to do, something they want to be their identity. Interestingly enough, Kansas actually was the only team to average 5 or more yards per carry against them last season. They had the best success running the ball against any of anybody who played Illinois. They averaged 6 yards per carry. They were the only ones to average 5 or more. So Neal had 120 on 10 carries. Hishaw had 98 on 12 carries. Even McDuffie added 19. But those first two, mainly with Neal and Hishaw, combined for 218 rushing yards on 22 carries. That is just monstrous production. You would gladly take that again if you can get it. Now, for the Illinois defense, there's some questions about how good their front is. Like, I feel like Illinois has a good linebacking core coming into this. The secondary is kind of a question. The D-line's kind of a question. They lost Jalon Newton, who was, for my money, should have been a first-round pick in the NFL draft. Ended up being, a day 2 pick. Keith Randolph was a really good D tackle too. And those guys, Newton and Randolph, combined to be nicknamed the law firm for Illinois. They lost 2 other rotational guys on the D-line. They had to retool with, albeit good players at their level, but FCS, JUCO transfers. And then they also did add 2 Power 5 transfers. But it looked good against Eastern Illinois. They held them to just 2.2 yards per carry. So that would be bad. The good news, though, for Kansas, they only got 1 sack against Eastern Illinois, and they only had 3 tackles for loss. So they weren't really getting a bunch of negative plays, but they were stuffing the run a little bit. Now, on the other side, it's a 6'3", 250-pound running back in Kaden Feagin. He is basically, since taken over as the true lead back, basically had like 4 straight 100-yard rushing games. So he is getting it rolling. You have to have secure tackling. You have to get him down low. You have to prevent him from getting going. If he gets into the secondary, it's tough for DBs to take him down with the size that he possesses. And last season, KU did fine against the Illinois running backs. The combo of Love, McCray, Feagin, which Feagin only had 1 carry, 13 carries for 70 yards. That is, like 5 yards a pop, but that's not a ton of overall damage thanks to kind of your pass rush in that game. The Kansas run defense looked good against Lindenwood. I'll give them that. But just like Illinois, you were playing an overmatched FCS opponent that you beat by 45. So how much can you take away? Now, another good news for Kansas, they only missed 5 tackles in that Lindenwood game. You go back to last season, Kansas averaged about 12 missed tackles per game. And even in the Missouri State game, they missed 13 tackles a season ago. So it was a much more secure tackling game in the opener for KU. And maybe that's a good sign that they can be a better tackling team this season. And, I mentioned this on Locked On College Football this week. Talked about that. Make your second listen here today or whenever. Here's the stats for KU in the Leipold era when they allow 4.6 yards per carry or more on defense. They're 5-19. When Kansas gives up 4.5 yards per carry or less, they're 13-2. That is kind of the bottom line when it comes to like a lot of these games, let alone one against a team with a 6'3", 250-pound running back who wants to establish their will. Second down, Kansas defending, Altmyer scrambling. That was a big issue for KU and Lawrence in that meeting. He had 70 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. Keep in mind, 72 of that came on that one big breakdown where nobody knew where he was, but he was also sacked 6 times. So that counts negatively against you in college football. If you're looking at just his pure rushing stats, he had 7 carries for 98 yards and 2 touchdowns against KU. So even outside of the 72-yarder, 6 carries for 26 yards and another score. Kansas has to do a better job stopping him scrambling and running with the football. And it's not been easy to do. Altmyer led the Big Ten in scramble yards last season. And that's even with him being benched for a few games. So it can be such a backbreaker if you give those up on like a 3rd and long. You cover everything, he takes off, and then he picks it up. I don't know what the answer is here for KU. Do you play more zones? You got the eyes on the quarterback. Do you use a spy? Do you mix this and that? Do you have disciplined rushing lanes where you're kind of, walling him into the pocket? I don't know the answer to that, but definitely something that Kansas is going to have to figure out in this game. 3rd down is the Kansas pass rush against the Illinois offensive tackle pass blocking. Illinois' pass blocking was bad a season ago, not just in this game, but all season long. Kansas had 6 sacks in this game a season ago. 2 of those were from Austin Booker. He's no longer playing for Kansas. That's not great. 1 more is from Patrick Joyner. He's graduated. But the good news, Jereme Robinson had 2 of them. He had a 3rd QB hit. J.B. Brown added 1. So you do bring back some of them. And, at least you were without Booker in addition to Kobe at one point in the second half where you can say, okay, it's not like we're playing the whole game like we don't have Austin Booker anymore. But, last season, Kansas averaged 14 pressures per game. They had 15 in the opener. That is less than they had against Missouri State when they had 19 the year before. But Dean Miller was solid in that game. Jereme Robinson was solid. They had 7 combined pressures against Lindenwood in that game. And so are those players, are your young guys with potential? Can they realize that early in the season and in this one? Because Illinois has a big physical offensive line, and the tackle play is going to be better than it was a season ago. J.C. Davis is protecting the backside. He's the left tackle. He was an all-Mountain West Conference transfer. There's talk he might be a first-round pick. And so he had an 84 PFF grade a season ago. Really good tackle that they brought in to help secure that. Illinois is still replacing both tackles from last year's team, but that could be kind of addition by subtraction when you look at them struggling a season ago. So that'll be a big matchup in this game. And then 4th down here is Kansas taking advantage of turnover-worthy plays on defense and not having them on offense. You have to dial down the turnovers in this game. You had 2 sloppy ones in the first half at Lindenwood. You do that in this game, all of a sudden Illinois jumps out to an early lead, and you're playing against a lead on the road in a sold-out environment. That would not be ideal. So no more dumb fumbles, tighten it up with the interceptions and everything. And KU did have some turnovers last year in this matchup and still won, but that was at home, and that's kind of how they got back into it. You had an LJ Arnold fumble, you had a Jalon Daniels interception. I think you need to keep it to 1 turnover or less if you want to win this game. On the defense side of the ball, though, Luke Altmyer had 14 turnovers, 10 interceptions, 4 fumbles, and that's not even starting every game. Now, he was a sophomore, right? You're going to get better at that as the seasons go on. I'm sure he's better at it this year, but he's probably still going to give you some turnover-worthy plays. He had 2 picks against Kansas last year. The key is, right, we think back to like the Oklahoma State game last year. Alan Bowman gave you a turnover-worthy play that was almost a pick 6, or Will Howard almost gave you a pick 6 to Rich Miller. It's not just that they're going to give you 1 or 2 of those. You have to take advantage of them, and this will be one of those games where you have to do that. Good news for KU. I mentioned a couple examples of them not doing it, but for the most part, Kansas has been a team that takes advantage of those opportunities. You think about last week, Mello Dotson with the pick 6. So can you do that again this time? All right, our player matchup. Luke Grimm against Tyler Strain. Strain is their slot corner. He had a 71 PFF grade last season, so good player. He had a 69 grade in coverage, so pretty much right above average to good. They also have really good safety to help here, but overall, Illinois was not a good back end and secondary a season ago, not a good pass defense. Jalon Daniels wants to go to Luke Grimm. That was apparent in the first game. That was apparent in all the games that Jalon Daniels has played. And in this matchup, Luke Grimm had 3 catches for 69 yards and that big long ball catch. I think that's going to be a big matchup throughout the game that they have a good slot corner going up against Grimm. Let's get to our Hawks the Sword. KU players we think can stand out and have those big games as well as pick a prop. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode today is brought to you by Game Time. Maybe you're looking to get tickets to the game. You're driving up. You're just like, I'll figure out tickets when we get there. Well, guess what? With Game Time, you can buy them a few hours before the event goes on. And what I love specifically about it is that you can see the seat views. So like in this instance, you might be going to Illinois. You've never gone to a game at Illinois Stadium before. You have no idea what good seats are. You have no idea where the vantage points and the angles of the different seats are. Well, guess what? With Game Time, you can see the picture of the seats before you even buy them. It even has a little panoramic view that you can tilt your phone around and you can see the different angles from the seats. So you know what you're getting into and you're not going to have like a blocked seat view because you can see it. Plus, with the lowest price guarantee, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Finishing things up, we will have a postcast episode, so make sure you subscribe to the show anywhere that you get it here with Locked On Jayhawks. All right, Hawks to Soar. This is where we go into what players we think could be set up to have a big game. I know I just talked about Luke Grimm being in the matchup of the game, but I actually think LJ Arnold is set up to have a really good game for KU here. Illinois back end, as I talked about, was bad last season. It might be better this year. There's a lot of turnover, new players that could go either way. If you were bad and lost a lot of players, that could mean it gets worse. That could mean that it's just addition by subtraction and you get new guys in there that are better. I don't know. There's still questions there, but Arnold wasn't super involved in the offense in week one. Just 2 catches. I think he has a bounce back performance, but I think part of that too was JD's connection with Grimm. Part of it was only playing one half, basically a half and a drive. And I think maybe even another part of it was maybe a little bit intentional. Maybe they didn't want to show some stuff on film, and he'll be a bigger part of the game plan this week. And so last season in this matchup, it was LJ Arnold, even with Jalon Daniels starting, who led KU in catches. He had 5 of them, and receiving yards with 89. I think LJ Arnold has another big game for KU. And then on the defensive side of the football, Jereme Robinson. Robinson had those 2 sacks last season. He had a 3rd quarterback hit in this matchup. And so while J.C. Davis is a stud left tackle for Illinois, I do have some questions about who their right tackle is going to be. You know, Melvin Priestley transferred in from Grambling State, and maybe he'll be better than the right tackle was last year. That's out of the FCS level. And, you know, he did solid at the FCS level. He had PFF grades of 54 in 2022 and a 63 in 2023. He killed it in the first game for Illinois, so credit to him with an 81, but that was mostly run blocking, and it was against an FCS opponent. And in pass pro, he was a 65, so about average against the FCS opponent. But again, if he can't make that transition up, and he did give up 2 QB pressures and a QB hit in week 1, which both led the line for the most that was given up. He's prone to penalties. He gave up 24 penalties in 2023. He gave up 12 penalties in 2022. I think Robinson can make an impact. It might be a sack and a hold. It might be a couple holds in this game. I think he can make an impact in this game. As far as pick a prop, not all the lines are fully out, but I've seen some stuff out there with Jalon Daniels where you can get his passing yard number somewhere between 200 and 225. I would be taking the over on that one for Jalon Daniels. So that would be my scoop. And then if you're looking at a sprinkle, you know, something that maybe you just sprinkle on a little bit here. We could go with LJ Arnold. I've seen like 50 or 60 receiving yards at like plus 100, plus 200. I think that's kind of interesting. If you can get Devin Neal receiving yards, I haven't seen that one available. He had 4 catches for 47 yards against Illinois last year. The Illinois linebackers are good, but they're better against the run than they are out in space. So that would be one kind of interest. And then even Trevor Wilson at plus 230. I always love a Jared Casey prop bet to score touchdown at plus 300. So those are the ones that I'm kind of keeping an eye on, but we'll nail that down as we get a little closer to kickoff. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll see you next time with LOJ for a post-game recap of whatever happens between Kansas and Illinois.